Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I feel that I want to take you on a journey. And walking in this morning and having the chance to see a few stands about the work that's been done here in Ireland, I noticed various words. I noticed opportunities, together, communities, ideas, room for reading, and I feel that those really capture, and I'm sure that I missed out on many of them, but it captures the enormous amount of work that's been done here in Ireland, but it also captures the variety of aspects that I hope I will touch upon in my address. Minister O'Riordan, Minister Dinahan, Its Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends on this journey on literacy, it's really wonderful to be here, and thank you for making me so welcome here in Ireland. Earlier this month, and that's why this conference is so timely, earlier this month, as you know, it was 8th of September, which is the International Day on Literacy, and many, like here in Ireland, countries have a whole week of different activities. In my own country, in the Netherlands, this year we had over 5,000 literacy events across the week. And if I remember at the time, my first ever speaking engagement in 2001 on literacy, there was one organization, there was one event in a small room somewhere. And if you then move the clock forward 10 years ago, 10 years later, 11 years later, and you have 5,000 across the country, again, we cannot stop, but it shows that there's a lot happening. In Brussels as well, you mentioned the EU high-level group on literacy, but this is sort of my Bible, if I may say, on the literacy work, that I was really delighted that the Right to Read campaign also quoted about. We also had a gathering of the follow-up work that's done out of the literacy high-level group, the ELINET sort of network of organizations across Europe that are now assembling work, including, for example, NALA, and that some of you work with. In other words, a lot is happening in member states, but also at European level. And what we do, generally, is we celebrate the good practices, and that is very much needed. Again, looking at the material out here, there is a lot of good practices that need to be shared. And at the same time, even though I look at the world as the glass is always half full, somewhere in my stomach there's always a knot that we need to do more. And I feel that there's also a sense of urgency. When I established the Reading and Writing Foundation in 2004, I said I want to dismantle it in 2009. The people kind of looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "Well, we're here to solve a problem." He said, "Well, you never do it in 5 years' time." I don't care. I want to know where we stand 5 years from here. And I keep saying, and I'm really glad that in the Netherlands, I'm giving fewer and fewer speeches. Apart from the fact that it's good for people to get refreshing speeches, and that people get probably tired of hearing over and over the same person saying over and over the same things, it shows that we're moving on. But that is where we now need to stand. If you think that every day society is getting more digital, that the written word is more and more central to everything we do, it also means that tackling literacy is becoming more and more urgent. Here in Ireland, we're talking about 1 in 6 individuals. In Europe, it's 1 in 5 individuals. And that is therefore 55 million Europeans that have literacy problems, functional illiteracy problems. That is not even looking at the children who are growing up at the risk of low literacy skills. So in other words, there's a sense of urgency. If that's the one word I would start with, that is the really context in which we're operating. Of course, here in Ireland, if I can just pause about all the things that are happening here. A number of years ago, I met Ines Bailey, who's the director of NALA, and we felt immediately a connection between the approach that's being done here and that we were doing in the Netherlands. One of them was using mass media, but also very much looking at ways to provide now on an e-platform to provide materials. So in other words, and I'll come back to the way that you are training volunteers, that's very crucial, I believe, in an upscaling of the approaches on literacy. I'm delighted to hear, and looking at the newspapers from the National Adult Literacy Week, Awareness Week, that there's a lot of interest. You mentioned that this morning I had a conversation in Parliament with senators, with members of Parliament. Last night we had a discussion with you, Minister O'Riordan and Minister O'Sullivan. So that is absolutely wonderful to see that within Ireland I have now met so many ministers, which has been a great pleasure. And I do want to quote, I'm sure that you have it still fresh on your mind, but President Higgins, who spoke at the start of the National Literacy Awareness Week. And I will quote just a few sentences from his speech, which are really the ones to capture in your minds. Literacy, as a gateway to society, is a fundamental right and must be a priority for all who are concerned with human rights and equality. Recognizing it as a right carries with it an obligation on the part of the state to ensure that the necessary interventions are put in place at the most effective stages. Absolutely spot on. He also talked about eradication of literacy. I'll come back to that later. And then this morning, I had a wonderful, wonderful present. I received this leaving Parliament, leaving the door. And I did read it. I was really pleased. Who knows this by heart? Okay. So when I look at some of the paragraphs, it talks about equal opportunities to all of its citizens and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and all of its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered, etc., etc. This is about opportunities, and this is about equal opportunities of everyone and of all ages. So you can imagine that I will now travel with it in this document. So thank you for enriching my insights in that. So basically, what's at stake and what do we have to do? All of this commitment, it's really all about, and I know that you're doing so much, so again, I am hugely appreciative. So when I speak about what needs to be done, it's not me telling you, but it's what I feel also needs to be done in Europe. It is putting words into action and upscaling some of the work that is already being done. So I'll center on three components of that turning words into action. It's the why, it's the what, and it's the how. As simple as that. The Minister just talked about collaboration, and that is absolutely crucial, and I'll come back to that later. So I would love to get a sense in this room about the collaboration and about the different components in an ecosystem that I will mention and explain later on that need to happen where you're all joining up various dots. So if I can just get a show of hands, who is working for a governmental agency of one kind or another? Okay, that's government. Who works for the library community? And of course you can have various hats in life. I have various hats in life. Who works for a company? Thank you. I'm very pleased. I hope that next year's conference we need more tables of your fellow people from the corporate sector, and I would immediately call upon you to bring in more corporates, more companies, because companies, I feel, have a crucial role to play in addressing literacy. Who comes from the world of academics? Fantastic. Who did I miss out on? NGOs? Anybody feels left out? Fantastic. But it shows the diversity of players, but it also shows, if I can say, that a table of 3 people of the corporate sector, I would love to see more people in that coming into this field. So first, the why. When we look at all the economic challenges that we have, the question is, why would we invest in literacy and libraries in particular as this crucial hub in communities and delivering literacy mechanisms. Why would we do that? The other question is, why is the smartest and most sustainable investment in a society, in fact, an investment in early reading? I guess to you and me that is clear. But why is it that big parts of the world who need to make decisions still do not understand the essence and the depth of that investing early on, right from birth into children, pays off later on in life? Why is it that when we have discussions about our early childhood centers, or learning centers and approach, we do not bring in the statistics about how literacy is an indicator for crime later on? We should have these discussions not separately, but together. So the statistics in other fields should be coming in to convince people about the investment early on in life. I feel that, again, President Higgins had a wonderful summary of the why. And he said that citizenship is about more than rights. It's about belonging. It's about being at home in one's world without fear or shame. Don't we owe it to our fellow citizens to participate in society without fear or shame? And that's indeed, for me, ultimately the why. As was said, it's much more than a technical skill. It really is about a sense of self-confidence. I remember the very first time when I handed out 10 certificates to literacy ambassadors, people who at a later stage in life had learned to read and write. And they were standing on stage. I was very pregnant. I was very pregnant. And those of you who've been pregnant realize that perhaps you might be a little bit emotional when you're pregnant. But nevertheless, I could not believe what was happening. I thought I would just hand the certificates, I would hand flowers to 10 individuals, and that was it. But the emotion on that stage sticks with me always. And over the years, of course, I'm meeting a lot of learners and a lot of people who've taken that brave stage to start learning. But I went to speak with them, and I realized, when I heard their life stories, that it was the first time at the age of 55, 65, 70, that they were standing on stage, that people clapped for them, applauded for them, that they received a bunch of flowers, and that somebody said, "You are fantastic." The first time in your lives. If we think back at our own lives, that does not compare. We had that opportunity, but people who haven't had that opportunity, that for me captures the essence of literacy. So when we extrapolate that and take that from those 10 individuals on stage with people applauding to and the flowers that they receive, and we take that to the level of the numbers that we have and we put that knowledge together, surely everything we do must be centered around the psychology and the life stories and the happenings, what's happened in the lives of those individuals in addressing and developing the strategy. And that's in fact what we're doing in the Netherlands. I'll come back to that later. But that for me is the essence of the why. Because if those people cannot and feel that they are not participating in society, that society is not for them, that the measures we're coming up with all good intentions, are really not about them because they don't belong to society, that is ultimately what literacy is all about and can help break through. And I would dare to say that 9 out of 10 issues, 9.5 out of 10 issues, ultimately, when you look at them, one part of the solution is addressing literacy. So that for me is another why. When you look at health issues, the death risk of low literate people is 1.5 to 2 times higher. You look at safety issues, that 5 to 10% of work-related incidents are caused by literacy issues. We look at prison inmates, 60 to 80% of them have low literacy skills. We look at our ambitions on e-government, and so on and so forth. But if society doesn't dare to look at itself in the mirror and say, we have this issue, it's not just by people coming from outside in. No, this is about every citizen in our country, but we haven't managed to get people through the system, making them literate. Then we really should be looking at every issue and every aspect of society of addressing this literacy component. And the good thing is that therefore, if you start looking at it that way, which I know that many ways you're already starting to do, then you can actually start. It's quite easy, but you have to do it in many places. You have to start looking, then where are the barriers? Where are the unlocking factors in the systems that we've decided, we've created, but that we've created thinking that everybody is literate. But you put yourself in the shoes of the 10 individuals on that stage, and you think, maybe we should include different moments of intervention in systems that we've created. And lastly, the why, it has to be said, there is a huge economic cost to literacy. In the Netherlands, we had a study, which was very conservative in the end in its estimate, of about 550 million that literacy costs a year. Actually, UNESCO came up with a model where it says literacy costs societies 2% of its GDP. I'm more of a believer of the latter number. So in other words, I think that there's enough reasons why invest in literacy. And why invest in libraries? If I can just pause for a moment of a specific, I wouldn't even call it an institution, but of a function in society, in communities that need our attention. I'm slightly worried, and you can take up the slightly, I'm very worried, but not when I hear in Ireland when I feel that last night's discussion was so much about libraries being at the center of the communities, the link with local government, absolutely crucial. But generally speaking, when I'm going across Europe, libraries are too often perceived as old-fashioned, as why do we still need them? We have digital reading, we have all kinds of other solutions. I actually think it's totally the opposite. It is the moment now when we have our disenfranchised communities, when we are losing people to thoughts that we don't want to lose them to. We have radicalization in communities. Having libraries as places of belonging, as places of learning, and as places of development is absolutely crucial. Here in Ireland you have, as you know more than I do, 350 public libraries. Does anybody know how many you have in Europe? Who says 20,000? Of course, I'll go to the highest number. I'll reveal it. 65,000. 65,000 public libraries in the European Union. 100 million Europeans visit a public library at least once a year. I cannot imagine another network that is so accessible within communities as public libraries. So I'm really delighted that my foundation was asked by the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation to be their European partner to put this function back into the minds of policymakers and put it back on the agenda and remind ourselves of how important libraries are. Now, in order for you to take a pause and to reflect and to remember those 10 people on stage, I'd also like to introduce you to Ron Redmond. And Ron Redmond is your fellow countryman, and he has some really insightful thoughts and shares his experience about what libraries did to his life.
Well, starting with my life, we left Ireland in the early 50s, like thousands of others did, because there was no work here, poverty. And we went to London. I was brought up in London in the 50s, just after the war. Left school at 15, could hardly read when I left school. And there was no hope for you in the 50s then, you know. We just called names, that's all. And then I met this girl when I was 19, and she was into books, and it really opened my world up. It opened me up completely. I got a job as a HGV driver, drove all around England, and came over here, got a job here when I retired 5 years ago, during the library, and I it opened up my eyes completely, it was as if it was a new life. I took courses on the emails and on the computer. It was unbelievable. It brought me back to 19 when I learned how to read properly, and I can get in touch with my children in England, my nieces and nephews in Spain and Germany. I can get in touch with my brother in New Zealand, email him, Skype, everything. And it's just a new world for me. And I'm coming up to 69 now, and I feel like a new man, and the library has really done this for me.
So that's Ron Redmond. I had the pleasure of meeting him in Brussels a few weeks ago and a few months ago, and you can see it in people's eyes when he says, "I'm a new man," and he means it. That brings me to the what. Again, you will hear constantly it's all about people. And if there was one element of what needs to be done in addressing literacy, it is for me breaking through the intergenerational cycle. That if you imagine, be it a Ron Redmond or anyone, to think that he or she is a parent, is a grandfather, is somebody who has something to give to a new generation, we're immediately reminded that anything we have to do, we always have to think of that individual's lives and the interaction that we have with other generations. In other words, for example, I was in Poland, where you have a 40% illiteracy rate, a 40%. They're at the bottom of the list at the European level. And there are wonderful things happening for children. They have a campaign called All Poland Reads to Kids. People are rightly so very proud of this campaign. But when I spoke to the lady running this campaign and said, "Did you realize that there are 40% of the homes have a low literate environment, at least to say, or people are lowly literate?" She never put two and two together, which is not to say that the campaign for All Poland Reads to Kids was wrong. But if you just make the jump and say, okay, what component in our children's campaign have we thought through completely the fact that the people, the enabling parents, the facilitators are also taken into the program? And I'm sure that all of the programs that you have that component, but that is absolutely crucial. It provides, on the one hand, barriers for the measures that we want to introduce, handing out books to children, making sure that they read, but to constantly remind ourselves, have we thought through, are the adults there to enable the children? The other way around works as well, where children are a wonderful motivator to get parents or grandparents to read again. That suddenly, that 3-year-old child that always was able and could never challenge you as a grandparent whether you were actually reading the words on the page in the book, if that child starts to read, it becomes hugely painful for the parent or for the grandparent to say, well, my child now sees that I'm actually lying. And those dynamics are really jewels in developing our strategy to constantly remind ourselves it's about the psychology of the people that we need to address, and the intergenerational aspect is crucial. So I feel that I don't want to throw all kinds of numbers at you, but storytelling, of course, is a wonderful tradition here in Ireland. I have my own storytelling book that I was given last night, for which I thank you. But if we know how important storytelling and reading aloud is, if there was some research done in the US, that if you think about it, by the age of 3, that children who grow up in a literate environment have heard 20 million more words than those in less advantaged peers. 20 million words. You can only imagine that if we focus on children at a very early age, right from birth, reading starts by talking, nothing else. So your storytelling tradition is absolutely wonderful. But the way we then raise them up until the moment that they go to school, Of course, the work that's done by teachers, who fortunately here in this country, one of the few countries, you have a great standing and great reputation of your teachers, and I'm really impressed with that. Of course, they have a very easier job if the children come into the school being literate. So family literacy programs, for me, would be probably the most cost-effective and the most effective programs that you have. Now, to highlight this intergenerational vicious circle that we have to break through, we did a little movie, we created a small movie about the life of Lisa in the Netherlands, a fictional person called Lisa. And if you can just bear with me and think through what it takes in your programs if the intergenerational component is actually taken into account. Here is the life of Lisa.
This is the story of Lisa. Lisa grows up in a family where her parents don't talk to her very much, and they don't read books or newspapers. Lisa goes to kindergarten 3 days a week. They have a language program at the school, but they hardly use it. The kindergarten assistants have diplomas, but they can't really read or write very well themselves. At primary school, Lisa gets more and more behind. From the age of 8, no one really helps her with her reading or writing, and because of that, she struggles with other subjects too. The teacher notices that Lisa has difficulties, but doesn't know how to help. By the time she's 10, Lisa can't keep up with the class anymore. Lisa's parents are not worried about her bad school results. Drawing and crafts, isn't she very good at these? And are there other things besides reading, writing and maths that can make her happy? Lisa struggles through her school years and chooses the shortest course she can find, Health and Social Care Level 2. Having failed reading and writing, but with a diploma in her pocket, Lisa looks for a job. A friend helps her to write the job applications. Filling in forms is not the only problem. Lisa has difficulties understanding her mail and paying her bills via online banking. She's often in debt. At work, Lisa often has to ask her colleagues for help, and her boss thinks she's not motivated. Lisa suffers from stress and feels unhealthy. Then, Lisa meets a man. Together, they have a daughter, Mary. Mary's parents don't talk to her very much, and they don't read books or newspapers. The choice is ours. We can rewrite Mary's story together.
That, I think, sums up the intergenerational component. And so lastly, I will turn to the how. We had the why, we had the what, and now it's the how. Again, I'm really impressed with the work that's been done with the Right to Read campaign. You have the Awareness Week, you have the work that's been done by NALA. And over the years, where you start with agenda setting and you put it on the agenda for policymakers to know, but also very much that the surroundings of lowly literate people start to be more aware, that bank clerks realize that people come to their desks and not knowing how to fill out a form, that everybody becomes aware that we have co-citizens, we have fellow citizens with that issue. So for many years, you're plowing away, putting it on the agenda. And then, as I said, 5 years later, I was with my 2009 deadline of needing to dismantle the organization, and you become anxious, and you say, and then what? We weren't responsible for actually getting learners to learn. But if you say A, you need to say B. So we then realized in the Netherlands, we thought through, well, what happens after that agenda setting? We had a national helpline, so all the work of agenda setting, you go through a funnel, that's the helpline, but then what happens? That for me was a big black box, and we didn't really know. So we delved into that, and we realized that we have, and I do not want to underestimate the importance of educational centers. They're absolutely crucial. But they were big, and they are big in our country. They're really quite large. So if you go back to the 10 people on stage and realizing the sense of shame, the kind of experiences they had, that kind of educational center, there's 1,000 steps towards that. So what we said is, does that work? And actually, do we know how many people flow out of that system that we've organized for ourselves, that on paper looks absolutely perfect? So we looked at that, and we talked to our colleagues here in Ireland, we talked to colleagues in France, we talked to colleagues in the UK, and actually there were components of various elements where we said, actually, it gave us the confidence to speak with the minister at the time and to say, well, perhaps we should take a blank piece of paper and say, what is actually, from the perspective of the potential learner, what needs to happen? And we said, if we don't quite know, if we are constantly finding it so hard to get people, A, to admit that they have the issue and then take the step to go to the learning center, maybe we should flip the system. We should go into the communities and find the individuals. We know that they're everywhere. They have jobs, they don't have jobs, they are men, they are women, they are everywhere. But we need to get them to the learning stage. So that's what we did. And we created what I would call ecosystems, where you're joining up at a local and regional level, where you're saying at every place where an individual goes, those are the dots that we need to join up. A person goes to a hospital, to an employment center, to a medical center, to the doctor, to the schools of their children, to the library. If we all separate those moments, they're not a joined up team, they're not a joined up strategy. So you're creating this ecosystem, but by simply, logically, going through the lives of those individuals and thinking, where are you there? And that becomes an opportunity for intervention. So we went to the minister and spoke with her, again, inspired by examples here in Ireland and in the UK in particular, where they have a program called Language Skills for Life. And we said, well, what if we start training volunteers who go into the veins of society, libraries being a central hub in the communities, and joining up the 40, 50 organizations that somehow an individual has an interaction with. She said, after 3 months, go ahead and pilot it. So we took 6 regions where we basically said, let's create those ecosystems for change. And it was, again, going back to the stage, awareness raising, making them aware, making them realize, helping them to think through, okay, if you now know that literacy is an issue, think through the way that you've organized your system again. And then joining them up. So it's an individual work, it's like a matrix situation. And that's what we did. After a pilot of 3 years of plowing away and writing down what we were doing, the outcomes were absolutely staggering. And we actually realized that with a 1/10 of the traditional budget, we managed to get twice as much outcome. So the results were really staggering. We had the University of Maastricht measuring the outcomes. And the learning outcomes weren't just on the writing skills, but very much on the social participation skills and a sense of self-esteem. So the trickle effect was absolutely really huge. So organizing an ecosystem like that requires, and every ecosystem is different. So we have, even though we are a very small country, but the difference between the north and the south, but that actually is, you're able to do that. But the advantage is that you really are working towards a same goal. You make a nice proclamation, you sign it, and all those 40 or 50 organizations are saying, we are committing to absolutely the same goal. So that's what we did in the Netherlands with the program called Language for Life. There is, of course, no blanket approach. Every country is different, so I'm not professing and saying that you should take this and immediately put it in Ireland because you already have so many different things happening. But perhaps it is an inspiration to say that, yes, libraries, for example, are very important. The access, local government and libraries is important. But why not go slightly further and hook up with the local doctor's office and the association of the doctors, with the dentist, and think through the lives of individuals. So as my final visual before closing, I'd like to share just as an interesting example from Estonia, where one library actually did exactly that and started to think, what unusual suspect should come into my library to motivate people to read? Here's an example.
Mul on väga eriline koer, kellele meeldib lastega suhelda ja temaga ringi liikudes ma sain aru, kuivõrd palju lapsed otsivad kontakti loomaga. Ja sealt mul tekkiski idee, et ma saan aidata sellega, et ma võimaldan oma koeral lastega suhelda. Ja lugemise projekt on üks neid, kus laps, kellel on raske õppida lugema, saab seda teha sõbraseltsis ja stressivabalt. Et sealt sai idee.
Kui Maarja 2013. aasta sügisel koos Susi ka meie juurde tuli ja lugemiskoerte projektist rääkis, siis ei olnud ju mingit võimalust, et me niivõrd hea ideega kaasa ei läheks, eriti kui see tuleb kogukonna enda poolt. Et on ju ka raamatukogu eesmärgiks aidata lastel õppida lugema ja tekitada armastust raamatute vastu. Tänaseks päevaks on meil juba 4 lugemiskoera ja tulevikus soovime, et kõikides meie haru raamatukogudes oleks oma koer. Aga meie raamatukogu on lugemiskoertele andnud ka sellise väikese omapoolse lähenemise või omapoolse sellise üllatuse, nimelt meie võõrkeelse kirjanduse osakonnas saavad siis need lapsed, kelle emakeel ei ole eesti keel, tulla lugemiskoera juurde ja harjutada eesti keele lugemist ja eesti keele rääkimist.
Aasta tagasi samal ajal minu laps üldse ei lugenud, ta kategooriliselt keeldus lugemast. Ja kui ma nägin Keskraamatukogus kuulutust, et neil on lugemiskoer, siis ma veensin oma last seda võimalust proovima. Temale Susi väga meeldis ja ta sai oma tõrkest üle ja praeguseks ta loeb täiesti vabalt.
Now, I'm not saying that... Okay, you were all thinking that. I'm admitting I'm also the honorary chair of the National Dog Association. No. But seriously, it's just an example. I'm not saying that you should now bring in the dogs in the libraries. But just as an example of how you are, this library in Tallinn was open for impulses from outside, totally innovative approaches, and said, let's try it. Now, it's not going to work on every child. It's not going to, every parent is going to say, yes, I want the little stuffed animal of my child being licked by a dog. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, we need to see collaboration. We need to reach out to each other and be innovative and not and get out of our own comfort zones in a way to collaborate. To conclude, because I realize that I'm taking a lot of your time, you have a lot of interesting speakers today, just a few final thoughts. First of all, I'd really once again, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, it's not written in my paper, that I'm so appreciative of the room that I have in exchanging thoughts with you last night for dinner, this morning here at the conference, and I really appreciate the collaboration between Ireland and the Netherlands, and my ambassador, who is so enthusiastic about being here in Ireland, will certainly support that remark, that the ties are really important between the countries, also when it comes to literacy. So you have a lot of different components. You have the National Adult Literacy Awareness Week, you have the Get Online Week, you have the Social Inclusion Week, you have the Right to Read campaign, so much. And I hope that this conference today will help you even further in seeking each other out and saying, let's collaborate and let's start putting shared ambitions. The 3 words after ambition that I would like to leave you with. First, this notion of ambition. So after the ambition, 3 words. The question is it indeed what you want, like President Higgins said, to eradicate illiteracy? Is that what you're going for? Again, I believe, but who am I? I believe that that's the right thing. But we did have that discussion when we did the high-level group on literacy report at the EU level. And the EU has an ambition of 85%. And we said, do we support that? What do we put in our report? And we said, actually, and I was very diplomatic in getting all of my 14 experts throughout this process and leaving them the room. I was really the one asking the questions. But on this point, I stepped in and felt very strongly. Because I said that if we don't go for 100% illiteracy and eradicate it and want to eradicate it, this is what we accept. We accept that at the age of 6, 7, 8, or even earlier on, we accept that 1 in 5 children in Europe, we just say, you know what, tough luck, you don't have the opportunity. That is for me the only logical explanation of why we should go for 100% eradication and therefore really support what your president has been saying. The 3 words I'd like to leave you with all happen to start with a C. It's commitment at political level, at local level, at the societal players level, at every part, and at the table of the corporate leaders as well. It's the collaboration, reaching out to each other, and remembering why you're doing things. Any organization is not there for itself. We are a means to an end, and the end goal is addressing millions of people, like the 10 people on stage that I was talking about. And the last one is connectivity. Connecting the different channels of intervention, local government being a very good facilitator to create these ecosystems for change. And I'd like to conclude by sharing with you a quote from Albert Einstein that I believe in very strongly, and that says that those with the privilege to know have the duty to act. And that, I feel, is our task at hand. Thank you very much.